to you and the rest of your team for putting in the legwork to make this meeting a success. It's terrific to see so many people here. And the really encouraging thing is, it doesn't matter where I go, whether it's the north, the south, the east, the west, the Midlands, all over the country now, people are turning out at UKIP meetings in real numbers. Yeah. And this at a time when the other parties say that the public meeting is dead. They don't hold public meetings. They think they can govern, they can get our votes simply through sound bites and spin at election time. Well, we don't do that, and you're all welcome here. Whether you come in here to agree with us, whether you come in here to disagree with us, you'll get your chance to have a say. And it's gratifying for me because I've been doing this for some time. I was elected to the European Parliament way back in 1999. I can scarcely believe it, really. And in those days, we were considered a bit of a joke and written off, and we were denounced as being eccentrics, cranks, gadflies, fruitcakes, loonies, extremists. I mean, any form of abuse that the three traditional parties could find, they threw at us. And now we find ourselves not only above the Liberal Democrats in the opinion polls, but we also find the central aim of this party, namely that the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves, and that we can't do that as members of this political union in Brussels. We now find that is a settled mainstream majority view in this country. So I'm proud of the years of hard slog that we've put in, and I'm proud of the fact that we and our views have now become mainstream. In fact, it all reminds me of that story that Bob Monkhouse used to tell. Bob Monkhouse used to say when I was growing up, I told my friends and family when I was older I was going to become a comedian, and they laughed at me. Well, he said later on, they're not laughing now, are they? And it does feel a bit like that for UKIP. And as Bill said, I trudged up number 10 Downing Street today with my letter challenging Mr. Cameron. Because I've got to tell you, I'm not very happy with Mr. Cameron. In fact, I'm not very happy with any of them. Because what they keep doing, time and again, in an effort to kick into the long grass this key constitutional question, is they keep promising us a referendum. The Lib Dems, ever since Paddy Ashdown 20 years ago, keep promising a referendum, and then when it comes to the vote, in the House of Commons or the House of Lords, they vote the other way. Labour, of course, kept promising a referendum as a means of not having a debate on Europe, and since '97, till they fell out of office in 2010, no referendum was given to us. But there were some who thought that it might be different with David Cameron and the Conservatives. Sorry, Nigel, they said, we agree with everything you say, but we feel so badly let down by Labour that we've got to vote Conservative. And anyway, they used to say, just you wait till David gets in. You'll see what a good patriotic, Eurosceptic Conservative leader he is. Well, it was Mr. Cameron that made us a cast iron guarantee. Do you remember that? You're all sun readers, obviously, because that's where he made the promise. Cameron made that pledge, and indeed, they won the Euro elections of 2009, campaigning on that ticket. But now that he's Prime Minister, we might have a referendum, but of course the time is not yet right. But if that wasn't bad enough, he goes further. And he says, even when we do have a referendum, it won't be an in-out question on our membership of the European Union. And then just to compound that, he finishes up by saying that the reason we mustn't have an in-out referendum is because he believes it's in our interests to stay a member of the Union. So what he's saying is, damn you, I couldn't care less what you think, I've made my mind up, and I'm not even going to give you the opportunity. So that's what today's letter was about. And my letter to Cameron is to challenge him. Will he come on a platform here or anywhere else and let him tell us what he thinks the benefits of EU membership are? And I'm quite prepared to provide the counter arguments. I suspect I'm going to get no answer at all. He appears, along with Miliband and Clegg, to be absolutely committed to our continued membership of the Union, which is costing us a membership fee of £51 million a day, money that we would argue would be rather better spent in this country. He wants us stuck in a union that makes for us now 3,000 new laws every year, and we would argue that much of that regulation, be it on employment, be it on health and safety, be it on the environment, is actually damaging Britain's entrepreneurs. And I'm particularly thinking here about the 4.2 million people, small businessmen and women and sole traders. They can't cope with the cost of all of this stuff. And with employment regulations where they are, they're all frightened of taking on a school leaver. So we see that as being another deleterious cost. But perhaps the other big cost of being part of this thing, and the fact that very few people know, I love the ringtone, by the way. It won't be the last tonight, it never is. One of the other great costs of this that nobody understands is when we voted to remain part of a common market, nobody explained to us that it was actually a customs union, a very, very old-fashioned 19th century concept. And what it meant was that not just were we bound by the rules of the club, but that we, as the world's 5th biggest trading nation, are forbidden from making our own trade deals, our own bilateral free trade deals, with any other part of the world. Now that to us is madness, because one thing we would say in UKIP is there's a group of countries out there, you know, that speak English, that have common law, that have the same accounting systems that we have. There's a group of countries out there that now make up 28% of the world's population, and they're people who, when we're in trouble, come and stand shoulder to shoulder with us. In many cases, they're our own kith and kin. We have a broader, wider family in this world, and the sooner we cut our ties of customs union and political union with the EU, have a simple free trade agreement with them, and re-embrace that exciting part of the world called the Commonwealth, the better. But I must say something about what is happening across in Europe. Now, one or two of you may have seen on YouTube, from time to time, my helpful and constructive comments from within the European Parliament. It's often got me into quite a lot of trouble, but frankly, that doesn't matter because I don't really care. And I might share the story with you. So, when we had this Constitutional Treaty of Europe, if you remember, the French and the Dutch voted it down. And that should have been the end of the EU Constitution, but this dishonest, ghastly bunch of people rebranded it as the Lisbon Treaty, thinking that the good thing was it wouldn't get put to any referendum and it would go through. Well, of course, the Irish did say no, but were then forced to vote again. And one of the provisions of this treaty is that it would create a new President of Europe, a President of 500 million people. And we were told that the first President of Europe would be such a major, significant international figure. Wait for it. That he would stop the traffic in Washington and Beijing. Well, you know what happened. And the day of his acceptance speech, this little chap turned up with very scruffy hair, plastic injection moulded shoes, and a suit and tie combination that, I mean, frankly, you'd have done better down at the local pound shop, but there we are. And what I said was, we were promised a giant global figure. We were promised a man that would stop the traffic in Washington and Beijing, and sadly, sir, what we got was you. I said, I don't wish to be rude, but, because you know when something's that they may be. I don't wish to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to know, the question we all want to know, is who are you? I've never heard of you, nobody else has ever heard of you. Now, it was like a little hand grenade going off inside this Parliament. But folks, if you think about the great parliamentary tradition, if you think about what happens in Westminster every Wednesday in Prime Minister's questions, I think it's very difficult to argue that I'd stepped over any line. You know, I teased the bloke a little bit, but that was as far as it went. Well, that afternoon, the President of the Parliament invited me to go and meet him. That wasn't that nice of him. And would I appear at his office at 9 o'clock the next morning? So I turned up and put the obligatory exercise book, you know, down the back of the trousers. I'm just old enough to remember all that stuff. And in I went. A piece of advice for any of you: if you're ever invited into a meeting and coffee's not offered, you're in for a rollicking, okay? So no coffee was offered, and the President looked at me with this sort of very grave look. I thought, crikey, this is serious, you know. What have I done? He said, Mr. Farage, he says, you have brought disgrace on the EU institutions. To which I replied, well, I thought you'd been having a fairly good go yourselves. He said, I'm asking you to apologise. I want you to apologise to Mr. Herman Van Rompuy. I want you to apologise to the European Parliament. And then the one that got me, and I couldn't help myself, I had to start laughing. He said, I want you to apologise to the people of Belgium. And it really was all too much. Anyway, he said, if you don't do this, we will levy upon you the maximum fine that we're allowed to as a European Parliament. I said, well, thank you, sir. I shall consider your offer. And out I went, and I opened the door, and of course there were all the press, you know, the flash cameras going, and they're all shouting, you know, are you going to apologise? Are you going to apologise? And of course they all thought that with the prospect of a big fine, that I would back down, and that I would issue this long list of apologies. And so I said, listen guys, sometimes I think in life it's better to be a man, to admit you've got it wrong, and to wholeheartedly apologise. And so I now, unconditionally, apologise to bank clerks all over the place. But there is a very serious side to this, and it's this. The issue that motivated me from going from business, as I was for 20 years, into politics, was when Britain joined the exchange rate mechanism back in 1990. I thought then, this will never work, and of course within 2 years, what we saw were 1 million people on the unemployment register, unnecessarily, and some here may remember, record bankruptcies, record house repossessions, genuine misery, because we forced our interest rates up to try and keep the pound pegged with the Deutschmark. And so when the great Euro project was launched, I was delighted that we weren't a part of it, but what I've seen happening over this last decade has been nothing short of tragic. Just think about the situation in Greece today. Greece should never have joined the Euro in the first place. She now finds herself with a youth unemployment rate of 57%. It's in the craw a bit. But when I met Chancellor Merkel last November, oh, and incidentally, a private aside, I can assure you that Angela Merkel in private looks even more miserable than she looks in public. But when I sat down with Chancellor Merkel, I said, Chancellor, wouldn't it be better for your German taxpayers, who've just spent 20 years paying for the reintegration of Eastern Germany into Western Germany, wouldn't it be better for them not to ask them to sign blank cheques in perpetuity to the Mediterranean zone, and wouldn't it be a liberation for the people of Greece to break out of this Euro? Yeah. But no, Mr. Farage, she said, we can't do that, because if Greece leaves the Euro, other countries will leave the Euro, and that would be the end of our European dream. Well, there is a bit of me that says I'll drink to that, of course. So when you think about it, what Merkel is saying, what Barroso is doing, what Van Rompuy is doing, and what David Cameron is doing, with the support of Nick Clegg and David Miliband, is they are saying everything must be done to preserve the euro. And so what's actually happening is we've got a situation now where they couldn't care less. If tens of millions of people are forced into poverty, misery and desperation, they couldn't care less, because their dream in the big project, in the big idea of a United States of Europe matters more. And frankly, I have reached the conclusion that this whole project is not just bad for Britain, it is bad for the continent as a whole, and I want us to fight for a Europe of individual, democratic, free nation states that trade together, cooperate together, act as good neighbours, and we can sign that flag, that anthem, the Parliament, the Commission and the European Court to the dustbin of history. Well, I'm pleased to say these arguments now have a resonance, not just in this country, but across the whole of the European continent too. But it is now, as a party that started off in its early years as a siren, trying to wake the British people up as to what had been done in their name, it is now very important that UKIP performs a different role in UK politics. Whereas in the past, we just talked about who governs Britain, it is now beholden upon us to talk about how that Britain should be governed. Because we are going to get this referendum, and the stronger UKIP are, the quicker that referendum will come. What we now have to do is to point the way ahead. And it's not just Europe, folks, is it, that's going wrong in this country? It's actually virtually everything. Did you see the census figures produced today? The census figures showing the biggest increase in the UK population over the course of the last 10 years that this country has ever seen. The hidden figure, of course, is the BBC will tell you that over half has directly been caused by immigration, but actually that's not true. Because if you include the children born to new migrants to Britain, it is actually certainly over 2/3 and probably nearer 3/4. Now, I want to say this absolutely as clearly as I possibly can. I know that in some parts of this country there is still a residual prejudice against anybody that stands up and discusses the immigration issue. There is a feeling, apparently, that if you even discuss this, you are somehow pandering to racism, xenophobia, hatred and dislike. That is total and utter baloney.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Non-racist, non-sectarian political party. My biggest supporter in UKIP is the former black boxer Winston McKenzie, who stood for us in the recent London elections. And all over Britain, we find members of the ethnic communities coming to UKIP, being welcomed into UKIP and taking ever more prominent roles. And I'll go further than that. We've actually, in our constitution, and we're the only party in Britain that's done this, if you've ever been a member of an extreme right-wing or left-wing political organisation, we don't even want you as a member of our party. All right, so it's clear. But we cannot, ladies and gentlemen, and we should not, allow the current migratory flow into Britain to continue the way that it is. I think there is something fundamentally wrong with the fact that if you come in tomorrow morning on the overnight coach from Warsaw, and you come into Victoria Station, and you go to the local government office, and you say, I'm self-employed, and I'm looking for help, you will get housing benefit within a fortnight. Now, I'm sorry, but our view is this. Our view is the benefit system is there for British families that have, in many cases, paid into this system for generations.
Yeah.
Something that is right and is just and is fair. You know, this government said it would cut immigration into Britain from hundreds of thousands a year to tens of thousands a year. The official figures for 2011 are that 593,000 people settled in this country last year. If we carry on with this current rate, it will be an increase in the population of this country that is the equivalent to the 8 largest cities in Britain outside London added up together. We have the biggest strain we've ever had on our public resources, and the answer must be that we must call a halt to mass uncontrolled immigration into this country. Yes, we will pursue a sensible work permit system, a sensible immigration system, but we should model what we do in future on what Australia does, by saying we want people to come who sign up to the British way of life, who swear an allegiance to our Queen, and who have got a skill to bring to this country. And I want us, everybody else wants to duck away from this issue and not discuss it at all. And I want us to be the party offering a sensible, positive policy solution.
Yeah.
And at a time when unemployment is rising, growth is flatlining, even the U-turns won't improve the economy, I can assure you. But at a time when things are going badly, there is a hidden truth about something that is going on in the British economy that no other party dare touch. And this is the current obsession with CO2 emissions, the current green madness that has swept this country. Now again, let me put in a rider, a disclaimer. You know, I'm not advocating, we're not advocating that we should willfully go around and pollute the planet. Yes, of course we want to be responsible for future generations. But I have to say, it is seriously open to doubt whether CO2 emissions on their own are directly leading to global warming. In fact, since 1998, the temperature of the Earth hasn't increased at all. Now, I'm not saying as a party we should come out one way or the other on this debate, but I am saying that the science on this is not settled. But the desire of politicians, and in particular the desire of EU politicians who've now tied us to a series of targets, their view a few years ago was that the majority of people were concerned, so they would do something, legislate, and they thought in that way claim the benefit. We as a party are clearly, wholly, unequivocally opposed to the mass spread and development of wind turbines, both onshore and offshore on these islands. They don't work, folks. They don't work. Because when you have peak demand for electricity, it tends to be in January and February. And what happens in January and February when you've got peak demand? Well, I'll tell you. You get a big, unlike this summer, you get a big anti-cyclone, and it settles over the country. And you get fog, and you get frost. But there's one thing that you don't get. You don't get any wind. So you have to have 100% backup for the turbines that you've built. So the net effect in terms of CO2 emissions is zero, but the worst of it is the way this project has been used to literally steal money from poor people and give it to rich people. Honestly, every single electricity consumer in Britain has a 15% surcharge. Hidden surcharge, but it's a surcharge on their electricity bill to pay for the renewables programme. And who are the beneficiaries of that renewables programme? Well, I'll give you one example. David Cameron's father-in-law earns nearly £1,000 a day just for siting wind turbines on his land in North Lincolnshire. So we're seeing this crackpot project transferring money from the poor to the rich, despoiling our landscape and seascape, not reducing CO2 emissions, but it gets worse than that. It gets worse than that when we start to talk about industry, and in particular manufacturing industry. Now here you are, in the heart of what, until just a few years ago, really was the beating heart of manufacturing in the United Kingdom. The surcharge that every commercial company pays for its electricity use to pay for these renewable projects is now a staggering 21%. So when the local factory closes, don't be surprised, because electricity prices have contributed to that. But it's worse than that. For the big manufacturers, they have to comply with the European CO2 emissions trading scheme, where they're forced to reduce their outputs of CO2. So successful has this been that when Chorus closed down last year in Redcar, they were paid 300 million sterling in carbon credits by you, the taxpayer, to close down, because they produced less CO2 in the next 3 years. And then they announced the very next week they were transferring that production to plants in India. So it's the same story. It's a zero-sum game on CO2, whether that worries you or not, but we are literally paying to de-industrialise British manufacturing industry. And I want us to be the party that stands up unashamedly and fights for Britain's small, medium and large-sized businesses, and we can do that as a party of people that actually have worked in the real world before, unlike these idiotic college kids that are now running our country.
Yeah. It's like what they used to say, you don't live on a floor, so you can often justify closing a church.
I could talk about, but I hope I've given you a flavour of the kind of things that you will now see and hear UKIP campaigning about on a national and on a local issue. But I want to bring us back, if I can, to the main point. The main point is this: unless we win back what I believe to be our birthright, our ability to govern our own country through a parliamentary democracy, unless we win those powers back, then frankly, the rest of these conversations become irrelevant. Politics becomes dead, because all we're doing now at general elections is we're voting for a change of management, not for a change of government. And we want to get that power and responsibility back. I am not promising you that we will immediately enter some golden age. I've no doubt we'll get British governments that make bad decisions, but the whole with somebody else, and there's nothing we can do to get rid of any single one of those European laws that now go into a series of books that are 120,000 pages of close-type long. There's nothing we can do about it. So we've got to get back the freedom of this country. We've made great strides. We've shifted public opinion. We will, if this country, if this party goes on from strength to strength, force a national referendum on this issue. Give us the opportunity to win back our freedom, and then give us the chance to start to put in place some of the pragmatic, common sense ideas that I hope you agree with me you've heard this evening. But it's no good, those of you that come along tonight and agree with what I have to say, please don't leave here and then go back and vote for people that do the opposite. Please don't do that. You know, your own tribal allegiance to the Labour Party or the Tory Party is as nothing compared to righting the great wrong that has been done to our country. Yeah. We want to hand on to our children and grandchildren those freedoms that those that went before us actually went to the world in arms to defend at massive cost and sacrifice. That is how much this means to us. To stand up and fight for what we believe in, we don't deserve to get it. And so I'm asking you to commit. I'm asking you to help us. I'm asking you to join us. I'm asking you to do something. Now I want to know, can I have a little bit of an audience participation here? Can I see a show of hands? Those people in the audience who are not members of UKIP, hands up. Oh, well, that's about 50-50. Right, can you lock the doors at the back? You are the people that I'm appealing to more than anybody. We need your help. We're on the right track. We've got a bit of momentum going with us. Come, please, and give us a hand. And let's change the face of British politics. Let's change the nature and the history of this country. We can do it. Are you with us?
Yes!
Right. Now, it's your turn. So I'm quite happy to take any question on any subject. I would just ask, for the sake of the rest of the audience, that if anybody's got a particular hobby horse, you know, I think a minute or so is enough for a question, not 10 minutes. So I'm now going to ask people who want to ask questions to raise their hands, and I will come to you, and we'll open the whole debate up. So, questions, please. There's a gentleman there.
What is the party's attitude towards human rights?
Okay, the party's attitude towards human rights. Amazing, isn't it? I was doing a debate the other day with a very highly paid human rights lawyer who said the wonderful thing about the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights is it gave us a whole series of rights. The right to marry, the right to live, the right to a family. We don't need any of that. We've had since Magna Carta, evolving the best system of liberty in the whole wide world, based on the idea of liberty and freedom that we have as freeborn men, not as state-given rights, and frankly now interpreted by a court in Strasbourg that is so highly political that I view much of what it stands for now as being totally and utterly disgusting. Did you see that case yesterday? That case yesterday of a man who we granted asylum to, who raped a 12-year-old child in this country, and now because of the European Convention on Human Rights, we cannot send him back to the Sudan. I'm sorry, I've had enough of judgments from the European Court of Human Rights. A lot more we could say on that, but I think that sort of succinctly gets it right. Oh, by the way, one other last thing. The clever so-and-sos that appear on the BBC programme say, ah yes, but of course the ECHR is different to the EU. No, it isn't. It is a precondition of EU membership that you have to be signed up to ECHR and you have to accept all of its judgments. Indeed, more than that, the EU itself is going to become a signatory in its own right of the ECHR. So it is all one and the same thing. Please do not let these very highly paid human rights barristers tell you different. There was a question there.
Yeah. What is UKIP's policy on same-sex, quote, unquote, marriage?
Well, we are a party that is very broadly what would be called libertarian. We think the state interferes too much in people's lives. You know, whether it's smoking bans or hunting bans, we think in the main people are big enough and ugly enough to make their own decisions in life without state imposition. I think where we've got to with gay rights in Britain is about right. That we've gone to the concept of a civil partnership. We've had this in place for the course of the last decade. It has generally worked extremely well, so that people are not discriminated against in terms of tax, inheritance and all the rest of it. It works. If we go down the route of gay marriage, and by the way, isn't it astonishing that it's a Conservative Prime Minister that has introduced this? I think for millions of Conservative voters, this is a concept that is very difficult for them to believe. If we go down the route of gay marriages, it will not stop at gay civil marriages in a registry office, because within a very short space of time that would be deemed to be discriminatory, and indeed it would in some ways be discriminatory, and we would then be passing a piece of legislation that would actually hurt and affect the liberty of millions of people of faith in this country who are members of churches who do not believe this to be the right thing. And so we very clearly are saying we think where we are is right. We absolutely respect the civil partnerships, and on the basis that we think the churches of this country, frankly, have taken a hell of a bashing from government over the last few years. I mean, the woman that can't wear the cross, who works at British Airways, the Catholic adoption agencies, who by all accounts were doing a marvellous job, who were forced to close down because they didn't believe in adopting children to gay parents. Tolerance, respect and freedom in society have to cut both ways, and gay marriage would actually upset and offend many, many millions of people of faith in this country, and for that reason we are opposed to it. Almost like the Billy Graham moment, but right, okay. Can I see some hands at the back?
Nigel?
Yes, I hear you, shout. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Chris went for UKIP in Birmingham, right? As a member of the ex-armed forces, right, how does the present Defence Secretary plan to, what we call, double the number of what we call the reservists? What's the name? That is what's the name?
I am absolutely just disgusted by what this government has done to our armed forces. We've all but destroyed the Royal Navy. I was in Portsmouth the other week. It's now a museum. It isn't really an active naval force anymore. We haven't got any aircraft carriers. We haven't got any planes that could go on those aircraft carriers, and if the Argentinians do invade and take the Falklands, we're going to have to ask the French to lend us one of their carriers.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, we're still giving foreign aid to India, who have got aircraft carriers and planes on them. But having wrought this destruction on the Navy and the Air Force, it is now the Army's turn to be reduced down to a size that is smaller than it was in the reign of Queen Anne. And I think what happened yesterday with the Olympics, when we realised a hopeless mess has been made, and the last resort we have to sort the thing out is to call the Army in, says something to me, that is that we live in an uncertain world. We never know militarily, we never know in terms of civil defence, we never know in terms of government muck-ups, when we might need soldiers. And the fact 3,500 were drafted in yesterday says to me we should not be reducing the size of the standing army in this country. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to use the territorial army effectively as building up the army numbers but doing it on the cheap. And it won't work. And I say this from some personal experience. My father is president of a territorial army regiment. And as he says, you join the TA, and between the TA and the employers of these soldiers, there is a kind of agreement. And the agreement is that the employers are tolerant. And the employers accept that at a time of national emergency, they will lose staff for a period of time. But what the employers won't accept is they lose their staff for 6 months to go and fight what I frankly increasingly believe to be a completely, utterly futile, hopeless war that is not in our national interest. So when my father's squadron came back from Iraq, nearly 80% of the soldiers who've been on that tour resigned from the territorial army, frankly under pressure from their employers. It will not work. And I think this Defence Secretary is, well, I was going to say he's the worst minister in the cabinet, but the competition is so stiff. So I hope that answers that. Right, good. There was another hand up there somewhere. Yes, sir, with the hat on. Yeah.
Yes, Nigel. Some time ago, you were shown on YouTube the House of Commons, giving the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown, pouring out scorn on him for his bad management of selling off the gold, etc. You poured shame on him, but it looked a bit staged because he sat there laughing. Did that really happen? He sat there beside himself with laughter.
Yeah, he sat there. We've got some trouble here. Stay. Yes, he sat there like a grinning idiot. And I think the reason for that was that as Prime Minister, when he got up every Wednesday in the House of Commons, Yes, he had a conversation with Mr. Cameron and Mr. Clegg, but they weren't actually providing any real opposition. Because the reality of Westminster politics is, on the big issues, they frankly all agree with each other. And what I've got up to point out, and I did this through real personal experience, in that, unlike them, I actually had a proper job, you know. I worked in the City of London, trading in commodities and trading in metals. And what I find what Brown did, completely unforgivable, inexcusable. Not only did he sell 400 metric tonnes of our gold reserves at an average price of $268 an ounce, and it's now $1,750. But worse than that, sir, he actually publicised the 17 different dates on which he was going to sell it. So what do you think happened?
The price increase.
The market came down, everybody said thank you very much indeed, and up we went again. And indeed, if you look at the long-term historical gold chart over the last 100 years and see the peaks and troughs in the gold price, you see in 98.9 this dip, which is now known technically in the gold trade as the Brown bottom.
You know, in America, that's called...
So there was nothing stage managed about it, but the reason he sat there like a grinning idiot was because, frankly, other than a little bit of theatre that happens in the House of Commons every Wednesday, I don't think anybody in British politics had ever really spoken to him like that. I suspect I enjoyed the experience far more than he did. So...
Other countries in Europe have the equivalent of UKIP?
In some countries, yes. In Finland, there is a very clear equivalent. The Finns party, headed up by a guy called Timo Soini, and quite how he, as a man from Helsinki, has got a season ticket at Millwall Football Club, I haven't yet worked out, but there we are. He's a great Anglophile, and his party is going great guns. They came within 1.5% of winning the general election in Finland last year. So he really is making progress. And indeed, in today's Daily Telegraph, who will be speaking at our national conference in Birmingham Town Hall later in the year, Bootle's now predicting that Finland will probably be the first country to leave the euro. So you've got that. But right across Europe, you are seeing the growth of Eurosceptic parties. But they're not all parties that we would get on with all that well. And one of the problems is this, that the project, whose big theory and big idea is that it would create peace and harmony and make Europeans love each other, is now actually having completely the opposite effect and is turning country against country and people against people. And I think it's actually very, very frightening that in a country like Greece, we see a party like Golden Dawn that has made a breakthrough. You know, who would have thought? Who would have thought that in all countries, Greece, we would see a torch-carrying neo-Nazi party with 19 seats in the Greek parliament? So the answer is yes, sir. Opposition to this project and what is happening is springing up right across Europe. Some of these people are our friends, but some of them, frankly, frighten the life out of me, which is why the sooner we break this Euro project and break up this European Union and get back to nation-state democracy, the better it will be for everybody across the continent. Well, look, if in a referendum that was freely and fairly conducted, and I do emphasise this because I've been involved in the Irish referendums and I've seen absolute dishonesty and, you know, 20 times the money for the yes side for the no side. But if as a result of a free and fair referendum, the people of this country said they thought their future was to effectively be a province of a new emerging United States of Europe, I wouldn't like it, but I could at least accept it and recognise that the campaign for national independence would have been set back by a generation. But I would at least least accept it. But what I won't accept, and why I'm in politics, is the fact that we've had from our career politicians from all three parties, with the odd notable exception, but in the main we've had 4 decades of total lies and deception about what the European you and I aren't old enough, but there are some people here, you know, who are over the age of 54. And, no, honestly, I've seen one or two. And they voted in a referendum, back in 1975, do you want to stay part of a common market? In fact, the question was even more sly than that. The question was, in the light of the government's recent renegotiation, do you approve continued membership of the European Economic Community, brackets common market? So what we've got to guard against is this. My big worry is that we will force these so-and-sos into giving us a referendum, but they will go through a sham, deceptive exercise. Cameron or Miliband will come back from Brussels, probably waving a piece of paper, British and he'll say, isn't it marvellous, we've been allowed to catch herrings in the Solent. You know, and there's been some renegotiation of the 48-hour maximum working week for junior doctors in hospitals. And on the basis of this renegotiated package, we should vote to stay part of the single market. That's the word they'll use. That's the word they'll use. They'll say everybody else is heading on to a fuller political union, but we will just vote to stay part of the single market. And my fear is that the three parties, the BBC and much of the media, will get round that project, which is why we need a strong, vibrant UKIP to point out, as I did at the start of this meeting, that it's that single market that is the customs union. It's that single market that costs us 50 million quid a day. It's that single market that means we have a total open door to unlimited migrants and able to claim benefit from Eastern Europe, and it's that single market that stops us fulfilling our global potential across the rest of the world. And if we do our job properly, there is no prospect of us losing that referendum. There's a gentleman there.
Mr. Farage.
Yes.
If you're in power, would you not consider first trying to renegotiate the terms of the European Union? And only if that was not satisfactory, then say...
This renegotiation word, this is really the con that I was referring to with my answer to the last lady that asked the question. Renegotiation is a con. There is no renegotiation on offer. Listen, they are faced in Brussels with a financial and political disaster. Do you honestly think they've got time to talk about renegotiating Britain's deal? Of course they haven't. And anyway, the European treaties, the ones that these so-and-sos won't give us referendums on, make it very clear. There is only one method by which you can renegotiate the terms of your membership. You have to invoke Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which states an intention to leave if you cannot renegotiate a better deal in the next 2 years. If Cameron was serious, if Hague was serious, they would invoke Article 50. I don't want to stay part of a customs union. I don't want to stay part of an organisation where the Portuguese Maoist Barroso or Mr Van Rompuy speak for your eye on the world stage. I want a clean, simple, amicable divorce and its replacement with a genuine free trade agreement, which is what this country thought it was signing up for in the first place. Yes.
This country at the moment is afflicted by 3 malignant and growing cancers. The first, the European Union, which you touched upon, we know that. The second, uncontrolled massive immigration. And thirdly, a looming, out-of-control welfare state. What do you propose in detail? Give me some examples of what you would do to treat those cancers.
Well, with respect, sir, I think I've dealt with the first two quite comprehensively so far tonight. I think I've dealt with the first to in some detail tonight. But the third point you make is absolutely right. The biggest part of government expenditure by far, and the one, of course, that is booming in a recession is the whole social security system. I'm going to give a quick answer if I can, because it's a very, very detailed subject. But the quick answer is this. You have to do two things. Firstly, you have to encourage people to help them get off benefit and to see some profit from going back to work. And secondly, you have to punish those that are frankly taking the mickey out of the system and out of taxpayers in this country. On the first point, when my friend Gordon Brown became Chancellor, we had a tax code in this country that went to 5,000 pages. By the time Brown had finished, the tax code was 12,000 pages. It is utterly bedevilled with complexity. But the one biggest stupidity of the lot is that people who earn relatively low incomes are having to pay income tax. So there is a massive disincentive for people to come off benefit and to get back to work. And so what we would say is raise the threshold to £12,500 at which you start paying tax, so that nobody on the minimum wage pays income tax, and it's worth their while, in most cases, getting off benefit and going back to work. On the other side of the equation, well, of course there are, it's right that we should remember that there are many people who are genuinely finding it very tough to get work at the moment. So let's just remember that and respect that. We must stop, as I said earlier, the idea that anybody from Eastern Europe can claim housing benefit or job seekers allowance on day one. That has got to stop. And for those that choose to live on benefit as a long-term lifestyle, but are deemed to be physically and mentally fit, then in many cases we have to offer those people a very stark choice. Stark to them at least, which is, if you are not prepared to take the jobs that are given to you, we will give you jobs to do on behalf of the state, or we will stop paying you benefit. All right? Gentlemen there.
If you leave the European arrangement, will it affect our business at all with the other countries?
That, I think, sir, is the single most important question that anybody tonight could possibly ask. And indeed, when we have a national referendum, that will be the key. You see, Cameron, Clegg, Miliband, Mandelson, Neil Kinnock is an attractive list, isn't it? Paddy Ashdown, whenever these people appear, they say, but 3.5 million jobs would be lost if we weren't part of the European Union. The last year for which we have trading figures are 2010. And in 2010, the European Union countries sold to the UK £52 billion worth of goods, more than we sold them. We're their biggest marketplace. They sell us far more than we sell them. You know, Mercedes will go on selling their cars in this country. My favourite Rioja producer is going to keep sending the cases to my home address, and we will go on trading with each other. The Norwegians trade without being members, the Swiss trade without being members, even Mexico has got a free trade deal with the EU without being members. We will go on, sir, doing business because it's actually more in their interests than it's in our interests, and it's the biggest myth that's been allowed to build up over the last few years is that unless you're in political union, you can't do business. It is patent and absolute rubbish, but as I've explained earlier on tonight, the other benefit is we'll be free to open up other markets around the west of the world too. We'll be far better off, sir, than we are right now.
I mean, we do a lot of business with Asia as well, don't we?
I'm going to take one last question before handing back over, and there's a lady there.
I'd just like to know what UKIP policy is towards the Scottish question.
Oh, that's easy. No, it really is easy. You see, Westminster has always got devolution wrong. We seek to take power from county councils and unitary authorities and have it in Westminster. We're terrified of letting any power go. Indeed, had in 1886 the Irish Home Rule Bill gone through, albeit with some protection for the Protestants in the north, I suspect there would have been no civil war, no thousands of deaths, and probably Ireland would still be part of the United Kingdom. We've made the same mistake with Scotland. We keep saying we mustn't allow powers to go to Scotland. Why not? Alex Salmond at the moment is responsible for raising 6% of the budget, but has the ability to spend 60% of the budget. He's taking us for a ride, isn't he? What I would say is I want to give Alex Salmond as much tax-raising power as possible, and I know that his crazy left-wing statist pro-windmill instincts will take over, and the current 28% of people that genuinely want independence, after a couple of years of Alex Salmond having full authority and responsibility for the public finances in Scotland, would halve. And that will save the Union a different kind of union. A union that is much more of a federal union, and a union in which the English actually have a voice, a parliament, and are able to stand up and hold their heads high and say, we're English, we're British, and we're very proud of both.
Nigel Farage. I'm just going to hand you over to Phil Wimblett, who's the chairman of Dudley and Household and UKIP. He's going to wrap the night up, say a few thank yous, draw the raffle, so get your tickets ready. Thank you to everyone for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Wimblett.